I've always said if there's a hell on earth, it's in the form of an HOA president. Karen Williams, the newly appointed ruler of our peaceful cul-de-sac, was a walking nightmare. The moment I saw her luxury SUV parked inside my workshop, blocking the space where I had been working on a car restoration project for weeks, I thought I was either dreaming or about to pass out from heat stroke. My heart sank. My $300,000 muscle car project parked under the bright sun, totally exposed, and there it was, her smug little note on my windshield. It read, "I needed shade. Thanks." Sealed every door shut with molten steel, sealed every door shut with molten steel, and left for a vacation. Yes, I left her car there. I figured if she thought she could pull that off, she was in for a real surprise. Life had been good up until 2 weeks before that incident. I was ahead on my orders, my clients were happy, and my workshop was my pride and joy. It wasn't just a place to work. It was my escape, my sanctuary from the drama of living under the iron rule of an HOA that seemed like it belonged more on reality TV than in my suburban neighborhood. But then everything changed. Karen moved in. She rolled in blasting opera music from her white Escalade, barking at the movers for not stacking her yoga mats just right. That should have been my first sign. Within 48 hours, I had received a laminated pamphlet titled Karen's Guide to a Better Neighborhood. And let me tell you, the woman didn't waste any time putting herself in charge. She proudly introduced her self-appointed role as the aesthetic liaison of parking and visual harmony enforcer. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. A week later, I caught her measuring the length of my driveway. When I asked what she was doing, she looked up and said, "Just checking to see if you're still within the community's visual harmony guidelines." Visual harmony. Yeah, you could hardly make this up. It started off small. She filed a complaint about my oversized mailbox. Then there was the complaint about the color of my garage paint and even about my clients causing traffic jams when they came to pick up their cars. It was a joke, well, until it wasn't. Slowly but surely, she started to get more aggressive. One morning, I came out to find her SUV blocking my gravel path. Tires dug into the dirt like she had just done donuts at 3 a.m. And what did she do? She waved from her lawn, smiling, and shouted, "Sorry, temporary parking." Yeah, temporary. I wasn't having it. I left a polite note on her windshield. It simply said, "Please don't park on my shop's entrance. This area is under video surveillance. Thank you." The next morning, the note was gone, and so was her car. But there were fresh tire marks leading right up to the edge of my hydraulic ramp. I checked the cameras, and there it was. Karen had driven up at midnight, stood in front of my shop for a full minute, then flipped the camera off. That's when I got the HOA involved. I sent them the footage and explained the safety concerns, especially considering the dangerous tools and flammable materials I worked with. "The response, 'We'll look into it,' said Mr. Lewis, the HOA president. 'We don't want to escalate things.' Translation, you're on your own." So I did what anyone would do in my position. I called the police. Officer Grant, who had responded to a noise complaint from me just a month earlier, was back on the case. I showed him the footage. "You say she parked inside your workshop?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded. "And she didn't have permission?" I shook my head. "Sounds like trespassing," he said. But when Karen marched up the street in her designer sandals and turned on the tears, everything changed. She claimed I locked her in and threatened to burn her car down. She was lying through her teeth. The officer shrugged. "I can't arrest her unless there's actual damage or a restraining order violation. It's a civil matter for now." He told me to file a report and document everything. And so I did. But Karen didn't back off. Every other day she parked her SUV in front of my workshop. Once she backed it halfway into my shop while I was working on a '67 Camaro. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled and said, "Just checking for safety hazards." Then she drove off, leaving nothing but the smell of cheap perfume behind. That's when I decided it was time to get creative. I ordered motion sensor alarms, repositioned cameras, and reinforced the doors with heavy brackets. None of it worked. The HOA refused to act. The police kept shrugging it off as a civil issue. Karen had found the perfect loophole, and she was exploiting it with masterful dedication. That was until she went too far. It was a Friday. I'd stepped out for a quick lunch, and when I returned, everything was eerily quiet. The doors were locked, but something didn't feel right. I opened the gate and saw it. Karen's Escalade, not just in front of my workshop, not parked on the driveway, but fully inside between my workbench and the lift. No note. No Karen. Nothing. I called her straight to voicemail. I knocked on her door. No answer. I texted, "Your car is inside my workshop. This is trespassing. Move it or I'll call a tow." She replied 3 hours later with, "Oops, was in a rush. I'll swing by later. Don't touch my vehicle." Then I packed my bags and booked a flight. To Colorado. I left her car locked in there as secure as Fort Knox. I left a message for Karen. "Don't worry, your car will be safe." Then I went on vacation knowing full well that I'd just turned her SUV into the most expensive storage unit in town. By the time I landed in Denver, the chaos had already begun. I had 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and a dozen text messages from an absolutely furious Karen. Her messages started civil, but quickly spiraled. "Hi, I noticed the doors seem stuck. Can you unlock them, please?" 20 minutes later. "This isn't funny." Then came the real drama. "You can't lock my car in there. This is illegal imprisonment." I didn't respond. The cameras were rolling and I was watching the chaos unfold while I hiked in the Rockies, having the time of my life. Meanwhile, Karen was pacing outside my shop, probably wondering how she'd lost control of everything. The police arrived to take her complaint seriously, but all they found was a woman caught red-handed trying to park in someone else's private property. There was no theft, no crime, just a woman who had been caught using her privilege to control everything. Karen's little plan was falling apart, and she couldn't blame me for it anymore. The rest of the week went from bad to worse for Karen. Her SUV locked inside my workshop became a symbol of her unchecked entitlement. Neighbors were calling me, offering their support. My inbox was flooded with messages from people thanking me for standing up to her. On the 4th day, she even showed up with a news van. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming I had held her car hostage. But as expected, the local news interviewed my neighbor Frank, who told the true story: how Karen had illegally entered my shop, parked her car inside, and tried to play the victim. To make matters worse for her, someone anonymously sent the HOA a copy of Karen's expired vehicle registration and the fact that her driver's license had been suspended due to a pending hit-and-run case. That was the moment it all came crashing down. Karen had been caught in the most ridiculous way possible, and yet she still tried to fight back, sending complaints to every department she could think of, but none of them stood a chance. She even tried to take me to court for emotional distress, claiming I had ruined her reputation by locking her car in my shop. But in the end, it wasn't just about the car or the welds, it was about standing up to someone who thought she could bully her way through life. I got a small claims judgment in my favor. Karen, of course, didn't get the memo that her actions had consequences. The neighbor stopped listening to her and she retreated back into her house, unable to play her mind games anymore. And so the saga ended. But in many ways, it was just the beginning. The neighborhood breathed easier. My workshop thrived. And Karen, well, she's gone. And in the end, it wasn't about the car or the welding. It was about respect, something she never learned.